Welcome to the Signal Room. I'm the only guy who stays stationary in this group, apparently. I'm punished. I'm still in Dallas, but everybody else seems to be on the move. Welcome, Wada'a. I believe you're in Italy. Vincent, you're moving around as well. And Jonas, I think you're in New York. Am I correct?
I am. But where are you, Vincent? Where in Spain?
I'm just kind of south of Barcelona, kind of down towards Tarragona, Valencia, right in a holiday park with the kids. Pretty cool.
Awesome. So today's topic is going to be a little bit more technical. For decades, the localization industry has been built on simple assumptions, an assumption of breaking language into segments, process them one by one, and measure everything in words. That model gave us scale, it gave us structure, it gave us an industry, but it also shaped how we think, how we price, how we design workflows, and even how we define quality. And now that assumption is beginning to crack a little bit. That's going to be the main topic we're going to be addressed. But before we talk about the future of our models and localization, I want to quickly tackle two current signals from just the last 10 days with you guys. Nimdzi released the Nimdzi 100, the classement général of the tour of localization, so to speak. And so I thought we'd quickly cover that at the start of our episode here. A quick question: is the Nimdzi 100 an important industry signal for you guys, or is it still a bit of an illusion? And does the Nimdzi 100 reflect reality, or does it shape it? Who wants to take a crack at that?
I think maybe both. I think it definitely shapes perception. People are looking at it. We are looking at it. I am looking at it. I've always looked at it. Talked a bit about it, I think, in the first episode as well. So it shapes perception as it gets quoted and referenced across the industry, within companies, sort of externally. And perception is, of course, reality. So I'd say it's both in my mind.
Anybody else have an opinion about that?
I think it's a good macro snapshot of the industry. Shaping the future, I'm not sure about it. I think it's a rear view mirror of the current state of affairs in the industry, but it's not a GPS of where the industry is heading. What I like about it is that we get access to the privately held companies' revenue. This is something that we did not have in the past. But then again, these were self-reported numbers via a survey, so they could be inflated. But again, the report is important. I think it validates what we think, and it gives us an idea, for example, of the general sentiment. It captures the general sentiment that's around, I think, 60%. There was a percentage there of the companies either adopting AI or innovating in AI.
The Nimdzi 100 shape perception because what gets measured becomes what gets discussed, and so it's both a mirror and an amplifier, and it's maybe difficult to keep it neutral, but it still shapes perception because we're sharing what gets measured.
I think to Wada'a's point, it's important for perception, but it also is a bit rear view. It is reflecting on what's already happened, and I think over a period of time, over a longer arc, it probably is more illuminating than every single year. In terms of, if you look at 3 or 4 years of the Nimdzi report, you can kind of get a good sense of where the industry is going. Where if you deal with one in isolation, it just gives you a snapshot of now, which is not as valuable. Like, I think, for example, bring it in the platform providers as language suppliers. I think that's been kind of interesting this year. It's kind of started to reflect that not everything is going to be the same one-size-fits-all problem that we've been used to.
Are companies managing towards that ranking, you think, Jonas? Are companies that aware, or is it more something that is a result of?
I think it matters, honestly, where you're on that list. It's kind of interesting, the quite common misunderstanding that it's a ranking of capability or impact in the industry or something like that, but it's obviously just a ranking based on the revenue reported by these companies or verified by Nimdzi. But it does matter. In fact, I recall an interview question a long time ago before I joined Scientific. I was with the CEO of the company, and I think it was the last question that he asked in the interview was, how do we get into the top 10? At the time, it was actually before Nimdzi. It was Common Sense Advisory at the time. Everyone was looking at that list. And he asked me, how could we get into the top 10? How long will it take? What does it take to get there? And so on. And I did join that organization, and he kept asking me, like, at least once a year, why are we in the top 10? We didn't make it in the end, if I'm completely transparent. So, but long story short, I think the takeaway is that companies are definitely looking at the list and managing towards that to a certain extent.
Yeah. Is it being watered? Go ahead.
You don't think it's just trying to do revenue growth? Like it kind of seems, I think in the middle of the table, maybe people are much more conscious of their position and maybe are managing tighter for that. And I think if you're 12, 13, you're kind of looking at how can we push it over the line into the top 10. But I'd be kind of disinclined to think that becomes the starting principle at the start of any kickoff any year. Get into this. I think it's more to try reflect your period of growth over a period of time and your position in the industry over a period of time.
I think the interesting thing is that it actually matters because people look at this list as even to how you frame the question, Stefan, originally, sort of referring to the Tour de France, it is a bit of a competition still, where people land on this list. It does matter, but of course, Vincent, I 100% agree. It's about the actual revenue generation, so it matters much more than we are on the list in the end. But I do think the actual rank also matters.
Maybe they should do different jerseys and not just a yellow jersey for the winner. Maybe that would be a way of making it more interesting.
I think it matters for the top 20. But the rest, I mean, dozens of companies are being evaluated there. And I don't believe everybody's managing towards the ranking because they know where they stand. But it's a validation of what they already know. Now, in my experience, being at the top 10 is very important because it drives business decisions on the buyer side of the business. And that difference between 10 and 11 could have a huge impact on a company. It could be cents in terms of dollar amounts, but just because you're in the top 10, you're qualified for the first round of an RFP, and the 11th is disqualified. So I think this is where it gets tricky from a ranking perspective.
To have another sports analogy, it's like the manufacturers' competition in Formula One, so to speak.
If you're a Fortune 500 company or even the Fortune 1000, there's a procurement requirement that if you want to evaluate or shortlist companies, they have to be the top 10 in their core competency and in their industry. How is this fair to number 11 and 12? So I think this is where the ranking becomes important from a buyer lens.
So maybe it's fair to say that companies don't manage for the ranking, but they definitely manage in its shadows. The other question that I had about the Nimdzi 100, frankly, this year is because I feel the waters have been muddied a little bit. If pure tech companies are now in the Nimdzi 100, does that mean anything for LSPs, or what does it mean for LSPs, and how do we figure things out if we're mixing it all together in one bag?
I think if I take a stab at that, I think the most interesting signal from the entire Nimdzi 100, at least the preliminary list, is actually the statement before the list, right? That they had to change the qualifier or something like that for who makes it on the list based on the transformation in the industry from AI, and that it does include pure technology solutions now. So that's just such an important statement for everyone on the list and others in the industry, in that tech solutions are now more than ever an integral part of the industry and probably going to be absolutely crucial to be on the list in the future as well. If I look at the scientific business, almost everything has changed over the last few years. We're using AI in some shape or form in at least 80% of our engagements, if not 100%. It's not always AI translation or AI post-editing, but it can be to support project managers or engineers, or obviously in R&D with Cursor and other tools to support productivity in the R&D department. Another thing to look at it for the LSPs on the list is to invest in partnership with the tech providers. We do that in areas where we've decided not to build ourselves just based on the opportunity cost of building everywhere. So partnering with big AI labs or cloud providers or tech providers on the list. So I think that signal in itself really underscores how big the change is, and our business is completely different to what it was 3 or 4 years ago.
I think whether you call it LSP or LSI or SLV doesn't really matter from a buyer perspective. It's this is a suite of services that are being sold, and they're going to vary for the next 5 years. And mergers or acquisitions are continue to happen. So I don't think whether you call yourself an LSP or an LSI, which is a language service integrator, and it's gaining ground now, is going to impact the decision of the buyer. When buyers are shopping around, they're looking for content creation or translation services or localization. And long before AI, people did not even know what LSP meant. So to me, I don't think it's going to have a huge impact. It all boils down to, okay, who are and what are the services and the companies included in these reports, and what is the criteria for evaluating?
I think it's good that the tools are being recognized as language suppliers. I think that is significant going forward. I think part of the challenge here, though, is at what point do you draw the line? I mean, it's quite interesting that DeepL is in there. Probably deserves its place. But then what about Google Translate, and what about OpenAI and where they're going to go? And, if this is just judged by revenue, well, then they're going to be number one over everybody just because of their total revenue. Do you know what I mean? So I kind of think there is a little bit of sophistication is going to be needed over the next few years to kind of keep up with the way things are evolving.
Does it even make sense to have DeepL in the same list as Scientific or Transperfect, or how do we even compare that?
It also is about then the level of granularity, because should Google Translate be there? Like, probably people are using it every day. It's a huge part of how people get their language, But again, does it fit into the professional sphere? Maybe not. It's a challenge. I think it's evolving and will continue to evolve.
Maybe the mental block for me is they're not really in the same business.
I think the challenge is that the report is ranking based on revenue and not capacity or innovation. A company like DeepL could be much more impactful than a large LSP in what they're providing and in their year-to-year growth rate.
Is this sending a signal that the biggest competition for LSPs is going to come from outside of the traditional LSP sphere?
There'll just be a new type of LSP. Like, think of the whole thing. Think of the big picture. Give me the German version of this, or give me a document in German that expresses this requirement.
Yeah, I think it's this natural change, honestly, and that there are new categories coming in. This challenge of having quite different companies on the list is not new, in that, like, you can ask the same question, or you could have asked the same question 5 years ago, 10 years ago, if should a pure play interpretation company that does only interpretation be compared to a marketing focused boutique agency that is a completely different segment of the market. But it is generally in the same realm at the highest level. I think it will be interesting to see the actual report when it's released. So obviously, it usually comes with quite a lot of insights around it and sub-segments and so on. We're focusing on either specific verticals, and I'm sure they'll have a list of just the tech specific providers and so on. The other thing that is kind of interesting when you consider industry based rankings or lists. I know that Forrester is working on one. They did one for TMSs last year, and we've been contributing to something more sort of on the services side. And I think they will do a ranking based on capability as well on that. So that's going to be interesting to see how they list these companies.
The other thing to watch for in the future, I think Nimdzi is going to have to consider the marketplace industry. You have platforms and tools like Blackbird.io now that offer you the governed flexibility. You can leverage 10, 15 tools mentioned in that report in that same ecosystem. How do you rank Blackbird.io?
Nevertheless, the one number that really stood out to me is that 68.4% of revenue is still coming from traditional services, what does that really mean? Is it because the numbers are lagging behind a little bit, lagging behind the reality, or is the AI disruption overstated?
Can you turn that number around? And that number is pretty big, right? Whatever is not traditional services. It would be interesting. I don't know if that they already had some comparison of how that looked last year or 3 years ago, right? Is that 68% higher or lower than it has been in the past?
But then again, the 68% of traditional services, it's about the how. Were they executed while leveraging AI? It's a hidden figure right there. It's always going to be translation, but it's the how behind it. Was it translation memory, traditional TM management system, AI, data plus AI, hybrid model? I think this figure encompasses a lot of moving parts.
I knew we were going to do that. We're going to burn a lot of time on the Nimdzi 100, but it was a very interesting topic to open with. So you'll forgive us for spending some time on it. Quickly wanted to circle back on South by Southwest. The conference are happening. We went to a couple of weeks ago. If you had to explain South by Southwest in one sentence to someone who wasn't there, how would you describe it, guys?
It feels that long ago, right, Stefan? It is literally 2 weeks ago, but we're out now, spread all over the world, and a lot has happened since then. It's amazing. I think for me, maybe that's not a sentence really, but alignment. I think it was interesting to see how all these different industries are facing the same challenges, or they have the same questions around AI, job displacement, opportunities, resistance, but then also sort of selective adoption. And that's probably even more strong or prevalent if you look at the media and entertainment space. That this big part of South by Southwest is in that industry, and how it was such a major pushback on using AI in media and entertainment just like a year ago or something, and now they are actually accepting that use, and it's growing. I think that was a massive change or a shift. The other thing that stands out is that language and global communication is kind of cool, or at least interesting to people at the event. That they seemed interested to learn more. Looking at our multilingual AI product, we had more traffic in the booth than ever compared to traditional localization conferences, which kind of goes back to the branding of the industry that we spoke about at South by Southwest during the live recording of the last episode as well, where we kind of became part of the mainstream narrative a few years ago. And I think as an industry should build on that. I think local managers that are in an identity crisis after staff or budget reductions, or LSPs concerned about the future, there is a big opportunity in how we brand the industry with all this change in AI. And even more so when you think of data for AI or RLHF, reinforcement learning through human feedback, there is a lot of opportunity there that kind of got obvious at South by Southwest as well.
I think I agree with that, Jonas. I noticed a lot of startups that had a cool idea, seemed to be working well, but if you dug under the surface, it was very surface in terms of it worked in English, but they were struggling then. They were using very small models to get, not very good results in other languages, etc. So I think there was a big gap in that a lot of people were rushing to market with a product that works in America but won't necessarily work in Europe or the rest of the world. And I think there was a kind of an awareness around that. I also thought it was interesting how many people from the video media stream I ended up talking to who changed their tickets or their badges from being media into being tech. They were very much, that crossover was very obvious, and people looking for kind of what the opportunities were as a new tool rather than as a replacement. We were kind of being able to, particularly with smaller filmmakers, I thought it was kind of interesting rather than the big Hollywood type of guys, but the guys that will be making small documentaries or 20-minute shorts or that sort of stuff where it's a challenge to have a crew out on the road. We're able to look at this and kind of go, oh, there's now real opportunities. So I thought that was interesting.
As you know, I got stuck for 6 hours at the airport because of a blizzard. But thanks to a tip from Vince, I was able to download some sessions or listen live to some of them. And One resonated really with me. If you guys know Ben Jeffries, he's the CEO of Influencer. It's a marketing agency. And he said that the rise of human first influence inside the creator economy is going to outpace everything else. And that creators who have built genuine relationships with audiences are going to outperform everything else. And that goes hand in hand with what we discussed during the panel around trust and authenticity. So in that space and environment, I think there's awareness that they need to adopt AI, but that lived experience, trust, and authenticity are going to outweigh anything else in the future. And I tend to agree with that.
Yeah, I saw a real hunger to find out what is real versus what is hype, and South by Southwest in that sense brings together professionals from different industries in such a forward-thinking environment. I really think that it helps move the conversation forward. Do you think that this year it felt more like a place where ideas were being tested instead of a place where ideas were showcased?
Oh, tested for sure. I don't know if you guys had a chance to walk around some booth, but there were a booth where they were testing AI Copilot's instances and showing how it failed and how it's failing over and over again and conducting retries. So they're not polishing or showcasing polished demos. They're sharing the state of affairs and the workarounds. So I felt it was tested for sure.
Are we ready for a quick fire round, or does anybody wants to add a final thing about South by Southwest? Jonas, you look like you're ready to say something else.
No, I'm good. I'm good.
You ready for a quick fire round? You guys still remember the rules, because last time there were some rule breakers, so I feel like I have to police this a little bit as well.
Breaking the rules a little bit, Stefan. Don't push us too hard.
We're going to bend the rules, not break them. Just bend them.
I have 5 quick ones here for you guys, so get ready. Here's the first one. AI agents will become the new users of global content, not humans.
Yes, they are a user.
True.
I think true as well, around.
The companies that win globally won't translate faster. They'll create differently from the start.
True.
Depends.
I think that's the direction.
The bottleneck in global communication is no longer language, it's decision making.
True.
False.
I think false as well.
I think we lost so much time in discussing and making decisions on whether to use the best technology or not, that it has been a major bottleneck for a long time. Hence, I think it's true.
How can you disagree with that, Wada'a?
I do, because decisions, and I touched on this during our panel, on the buyer side, there's no bias towards time. That time between the idea and the execution is very, very long, and it's taking time, even on the vendor side. And this is where the bottleneck is, because once you have the decision and there's clarity, then everything else can roll out very easily. So I guess it depends on what we're referring to. Jonas is focused more on the technology and the execution. I'm focused on, okay, upstream in the process, what is holding things off?
Fair enough. All right, here comes the next one. The next competitive advantage in localization won't be speed or cost, it'll be control.
False.
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 The real risk in multilingual AI isn't bad translation, it's confident mistakes at scale.
True.
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah, but I agree as well.
All right, well, we're getting to the primary round. Let's dig in the main, or one of the main topics. Are we at the end of the segment economy, guys? With AI native workflows, content is no longer created or evaluated one segment at a time. We're seeing systems that generate, adapt, and review language holistically now, and they're using context and domain signals and intent rather than isolated sentence pairs. So the question is no longer just technical, it's structural. If segmentation fades as the core unit of work, what happens to our translation memories, our pricing models, and the way we've run our organizations and the way we've been operating around localization. Why do you think that the segment model dominated for so long and continues in some ways to percolate within the industry, although we're moving away from it slowly, it seems?
I think the first sort of reaction to that is to the preface itself. Are we, or is it ending? I think that's kind of what we need to see if we can get some consensus on here, because I'm not sure. And it did dominate for so long and still dominates because it is very practical. It's easy to split sentences or split content rather in sentences using punctuation. It's smaller and more manageable than paragraphs, but it still has some context. So rather than just using words, obviously sentences make much more sense. It's good for leverage, and a lot of billing models are based on that. So fuzzy matching and so on works much better at sentence level. So anything larger, reduced match rates, and anything smaller would lose too much meaning in context. I think it also enables scalable production workflows. So before segments, and this again, sort of going back quite a few years, I remember as a PM, trying to manage larger pieces of content and sort of manually splitting stuff and sending it out to translators, where eventually when we really went with full segmentation, it was much easier to run parallel workflows with that model. Going out on a bit of a tangent there, it reminded me of actually the first kind of presentation or panel like this that I did, which was back at Gala in Prague. I don't know if it was like early 2000s or something. So I was on a panel on innovation in the industry. I was really quite green, but we were talking about segmentation and parallel workflows and having multiple translators and reviewers work in parallel in a document rather than having to do this manual splitting of content and so on. If anyone has the synopsis of that session, or even just like the program from Gala in Prague, year 2000 something, I would definitely like to see that. If you have a link, send it over. I remember we had Renato Benenati was in the room. Arturo from Moravia was in the room, and I was fanboying. I was so green in the industry. It was so great to see these people that were talking about all the latest trends and so on. But anyway, on the topic, so I think the three reinforcing forces for segments was that it was easy to count words or segments, and it's easy to work with. That's where I'm not sure that will go away that quickly.
What happened before TMs? How was stuff priced before TMs happened? I think, to me, when I think of the segment, and segment and per word, I kind of think of it as something that's really only existed since the 90s. Like, since there was capabilities with that. Maybe a bit earlier than that, but it seems to me that that's the model we have was built around the fact that a new piece of technology came in, which made us able to quantify stuff in different ways. And I think that's kind of happening again. I think that if we do think down the line, content isn't going to be translated, it's going to be generated. There's going to be multiple versions of it in multiple languages for the end user. I kind of think that it's a more document-led in the marketing space, for example. So I think the value of TMs will continue. I think they're very significant. The segments they're significant for leverage. They're significant for context and instruction. So it's not the end of it, but I do think its positioning is going to change quite dramatically. I think it's going to take longer than we think, but it's going to change very dramatically. It'll become a background piece that's been used to send better context up to the model that's doing the translation, and the human, instead of being in the chain, will be at the end of the chain reviewing and providing governance. So I do think that when that happens, do we look at it by risk, the value of the content, the volume? I do think that a new model will have to come in for the new methodologies, just the same as it did when TMs became a thing. And I also kind of think the use of sentence segmentation kind of has made it more difficult in a lot of ways for translators. A lot of translators were very disappointed when that happened, because the ability to change a message or really craft a translation was diminished dramatically. It really became more post-editing role. And I think that creativity piece that a lot of translators, in my experience, are really driven by has been removed by automation. And I think that is coming back. So I don't know exactly what the next answer is, but I don't think per word and per segment is going to work. I think the segments will move to become context.
So if we're addressing why the segment model dominated for so long, to Vince's point, prior to segmentation, we didn't have measurement KPIs. Now with the segmentation, it's predictable, it's measurable, consistency, leverage, cost, the way the health of the program is evolving, how the TM is improving. We were able to measure all that thanks to the segmentation. And I think this is why it dominated, and it continues to dominate. Because if you're on the buyer side of the business and you're running a localization program, the only way for you to measure how your vendors are managing the TMs and are moving them to the next level is through the segmentation reports. So I think it will continue to dominate. There's value there.
It's very interesting. In a way, haven't we forgotten a little bit that language actually doesn't exist in segments? And with segmentation, there is significant context loss and there's inconsistencies and fragmentation. Those are all trade-offs, and perhaps the most painful trade-off that I've seen in the localization industry continuously for the past 25 years is that it's difficult to maintain translation memories consistently across large organizations, never mind if you have to do it across different departments that are competing on what certain expressions might be. Are translation memories liabilities in certain AI native workflows, in your opinion?
If they're decentralized and contaminated, then yes. But also, AI can heal TMs.
Yeah, I agree. Definitely, there can be an issue with TMs. They have a very good function, of course, in reducing rework. But obviously, yes, they can get dirty, outdated, inconsistent. I kind of want to go back to Vincent's point because I think it's super important to, if we want to kind of have an opinion or establish whether segments are going away, and it's sort of wearing into the word rate discussion, which is a big discussion as well. It really matters, how will the overall workflow change? And do we believe that we will go to what Vincent was describing with there is no source, no target, we're just generating content across languages? Then I think for sure, why would we keep segments in that scenario? There's no reason to sort of align source target in segments when you just look at the full document or piece of content. In a true generative AI workflow, generating 1,000 words versus 10,000 words or 100,000 words is often it's not that much difference in effort. There's some difference in cost of generating it in terms of token consumption, but it's not significant even at that magnitude. So the real efforts shift to setting it up, so the prompting to build the content or generate the content, preparing glossaries, the brand voice, and things like that, and potentially the review step for governance or quality management. So then it has shifted, and we should look at a completely different billing model for something like that. But it will take time before we get to that point.
I beg to differ on this one, because in a highly regulated environment, English, we're going to continue to need English source. In other areas, we're not going to need. You can create net new content, especially in creative, but when it comes to highly regulated content in manufacturing or automotive or even big pharma, the source, at least for the next 5 years, the single source of truth will be the master English. So segmentation is going to be key.
You're not wrong when it comes to manufacturing and when it comes to regulation, I think. But I think, is that continue to be true? Well, okay, you do qualify it on a time period. I think does it continue to be true if you really can send accurate context true rather than a TM? I still think that sentences will be used. I just don't think they'll be used in the same way. They won't be used as the basis of the translation. They'll be used to fine-tune the engine at runtime on jobs. And I think once that starts to happen, the sense of a a sentence-to-sentence parallel translation will not be so significant, even where there is a source document, because I think it'll be about the style and the regulation and compliance and quality. Like, to me, the benchmark of quality is what's mostly needs to change here. What do we consider quality? And you're making a very specific use case with that around, regulation. Well, okay, so maybe that piece of the content is subject to different rules. If we look at the big picture, that's one subset. In the same way as if we go back to the Nimdzi report, I was surprised how much interpreters were in the report as considered part of it, particularly over the last, over the changes over the last few years. So I do think that there will always be use cases where sentence to sentence will make sense. But if you think in the broad general terms, I think people are going to start talking about user satisfaction and quality. Like, when was the last time projects really failed because they weren't spell checked? Anything coming from an LLM is not going to really be dealing with spelling issues. So that, as a benchmark of quality, kind of goes away. Grammar kind of goes away. It's much more about what's going to be significant to the end user and the satisfaction that they're getting out of that, and for the enterprise customer, how to get closer to their customers, how to actually build that tighter relationship. I think that if we don't change the quality expectations, we're always going to be stuck in this paradigm.
Yeah, I wonder if even for the manufacturing industry or regulated industries, I think it still boils down to the actual workflow. Is the workflow going to change? Then the pricing will change. Thinking of a space where we kind of do something that is not word based for a certain extent, to a certain extent. So in regulated industries like legal, for example, where you would have a translation and a review step where it's still segment based, and you charge that per word or per whatever segment, and matching and so on. But then you have an in-country legal review that happens after that, where you might pay you would pay an SME to review the document and whether that document makes sense in that particular jurisdiction. So you're almost already moving away from that, even in the regulated industry, while you still have word rates as part of the billing as well for the first part of the workflow.
I'm a bit surprised that you guys are continuing to talk about per word rates. I'm particularly surprised that Wada'a is going that direction, because I've distinctively remember having several conversations with Wada'a about the evil per word pricing being on the way out. If per word pricing doesn't disappear, will it become a surface metric? How do you see it? Does per word pricing survive the end of segmentation?
I stand by my previous statements. I think the per word rate is no longer, is not going to survive the next generation of buyers. People will continue to ask for it because they don't know better. You have to keep in mind that what's influencing the per word rate is the packaging. When the buyer doesn't know better and you're coming forth with a per word rate, they're going to move forward and benchmark against the per word rate. But when we evolve the narrative and start using packaging, different types of packaging, then they have a choice. I think we're stuck in the per word rate simply because most of the vendors are not moving away from the per word rate, and they're not reading the future audience and how they buy and how they think. So the buyers, yes, are going to still continue to ask for the per word rate. But is it a long-term effective, commercially effective strategy? I don't think so.
I think that's a really interesting point. I was ready to disagree with Wada'a and say that I actually think the word rates will stay, because it's just buyers are used to it to a great extent. But it's true, of course, that with the new generation of buyers, maybe that will change. But of course, vendors are optimized for them. Systems are built around word rates. Even margin and business models are modeled around word rates, where it's much more difficult to use some of the other options, right? That we've used and we are using more flat fee based models where we agree on certain volumes and then languages and so on across a certain time period, whether it's a year or a quarter. But it doesn't have the same predictability as a word rate. A word is a word, and then you know how much you're going to get billed for that. So it is not easy to move away from it. But I like that perspective that maybe with the new generation of buyers that don't have the same preconceived notions, it will change.
I think this is the perfect segue to dive into our secondary round about AI and autonomous content workflows. If the segment model defined how localization worked for the past few decades, AI is starting to redefine what the work even is. We're moving from workflows that process content step by step to systems that can generate, adapt, and evaluate language continuously, not in batches or in handoffs, but in loops that are increasingly automated. Can agents orchestrate localization real time, in your opinion?
Yes, I would say, if I try to answer that, I think we're seeing that in many use cases today, at Scientific and elsewhere. The valid and real use cases are definitely increasing in number, where we have event-triggered AI workflows that launch automatically when objects are created or edited or published, with translation and the sort of deployment of that happening in near real time, provided, of course, that you trust the AI translation. So you can look at things like agents coordinating and making decisions on analyzing the source content, selecting what LLM or what machine translation engine to use, initiating and running AI-assisted post-editing, quality evaluation, and route tasks in a predefined process, and so on. So I think the answer is definitely yes. It's going to continue to evolve. Not everything is ready. It gets stuck sometimes. It doesn't always work, but it's definitely coming.
Yeah, agents are already orchestrating the full workflow. I mean, we effectively moved from feeding and receiving or round tripping to asking to execute. You can automate all of the tasks and the agents can execute for you.
Our computers were, to Wada's point, a lot of this was already automated. What's going to change is what is doing the automation, you know? I think one thing, though, is that I don't think it's quite ready there to be replacing like a PM. I don't think it has the same level of anticipation and challenge. I see it much more as a project coordinator type role, where actioning tasks, tracking, all of the stuff that used to happen in spreadsheets that the PM used to have to do in the past, and via email and all of those ancillary tasks. I think they're capable of being fully automated by agents at the moment. But I don't think the depth and the language understanding that's required, and the methodology understanding that's required, is there yet, in terms of they can't quite grasp. You make your rules based around English, or you make your rules based around what you've done in the past. And if you're, I think the localization professionals understand that there's subtleties at the end of every single language, and start to build their thinking around that. And I don't think that the AI solutions currently are able to think around corners in the same way. I think it's still a challenge for them.
Yeah, do you think it would be fair to say that they're conductors, with humans still holding the eventual score? And maybe we can talk a little bit what the role of humans is or should be inside these agent-driven pipelines going forward, guys.
Maybe the humans are still the conductors, and you have agents owning an instrument and sort of executing based on that design from the humans still. So definitely humans will continue to design the systems. Maybe I shouldn't say definitely. I think humans will continue to design the systems, and of course govern quality and handle exceptions. There are still exceptions for sure, where it just doesn't work yet fully, depending on how complex the workflows are. So it's more a control layer or role than an executing function at this point.
I see it as initiation and oversight. But project management tasks, the majority of them will be eliminated, the generalist type of tasks, because we're seeing it right now. You're automating the task, the round tripping and all that. But the oversight, the setup, the initiation, the troubleshooting when something goes wrong at scale. Because now with AI, one mistake cannot be isolated. It's going to be failure at scale. So I think this is where humans are going to be needed the most.
Yeah, I kind of agree with that. I think the oversight, the broader vision, and also I think the ability to adapt quickly of what's required. I mean, the situation is changing so quickly in terms of what's capable and what's going to be capable. I think the answer now will be different than the answer in 6 months' time. And in 2 years' time, the answer will be completely different again. I think that the ability of the human to evolve with the requirements that's coming in rather than, that's why benchmarks are so challenging, because actually they benchmarks show potential, but not necessarily implementation. And back to what we were talking about TMs earlier, most of the problems I've seen around TMs have been bad TM management rather than bad TMs. And I think it's kind of going to be the same again. It's going to be around context management. It's going to be around understanding how to tweak the result we want out of the machine rather than throwing it over and into a black box that's going to make our solutions for us.
I just had a really interesting conversation not too long ago with Jurek Sisielski about the role of the TMS platform going forward. And the TMS has been having a central role in everything that we do. Does agent orchestration eliminate the need for a traditional TMS platform, or how does the TMS change going forward within this new framework?
Hey, TMSs are still designed for human use. Ultimately, they're a UI for human use. They're reporting for human use. I think TMSs won't go away, but they will change dramatically. There will be a new type of TMS, which will be file management, reporting capabilities, a lot more preferential information being gathered in the feedback loop, going back to the models. But I think that there's still going to need to be management of the system. It just won't be so focused around what we need. We can kind of see it from a report in most cases what we need, and then at certain aspects of it, that's where the human fits in. That's where you have the UI suitable for human. But I think a lot of existing TMS are going to suffer, and I also think ones that were more of a walled garden are going to suffer because they won't have the flexibility to be able to swap in and out models, swap in and out processes. I think that's going to become increasingly necessary connectivity between and for hybrid systems across multiple suppliers.
I'm not very optimistic about the future of the TMS, to be honest. For a long time, it used to be the center of the tech stack. It's not going to be the center of this tech stack in the future. It's going to be needed for integrations and APIs and connectors, terminology maybe, but it will become the backup utility, not the brain.
I would maybe to take a contrarian view on that. It just sort of realized, thinking back to the Nimdzi list as well, that obviously Nimdzi started adding tech providers, and it's the first time that some of the TMS providers are on the list. I don't think that it's only because Nimdzi decided to change their qualifier. I think it's also because of some of these TMSs have now grown to a size where it makes sense for them to be on the list, to show that. Thinking of like a phrase, for example, I don't think they've been on the list before, and they're quite large now. I think they're at like 53 or so million. So they've gotten to a point where they have the critical mass to also change with how the industry is changing. I do think the key operating word here is traditional TMS platforms. I do think that the traditional TMS platforms will go away, or they change. They will evolve into something else, which obviously most of the TMS platforms are working on now, and there's been some announcements recently around that. I think they'll be around still, but they will be something different to what they are today.
So we have 2 more segments left, and we're pressed for time, but there's been a fascinating conversation. So I'm advising that we go long and finish out the episode. If nobody is running off to another meeting, let's do that. The forward look around. Here's my suggestion for the forward looking around. I'm going to give you 3 questions in this forward looking round, and I'm looking for short answers on this. To get your opinion. So the first one is a very simple question. When does the segment economy officially end?
If in context of workflows, soon. If in context of word-based billing, not so soon.
From a financial perspective, when better, smarter, simpler offerings emerge, you'll see it disappear. And transcreation is already phasing out.
I don't think it'll end. I think it'll always be there for certain needs. It just won't be so prevalent.
Yeah, I'm with Wada. I don't think that there's a big bang moment coming in the near future, but it becomes irrelevant gradually as fewer workflows depend on it. Here's the second question. What new operational skill becomes essential according to you?
I don't know if it's an operational skill, but creativity.
I would say AI revenue predictability. We are processing words, we are delivering, but from a revenue perspective, how are we predicting the margins, the value of it? I think the minute someone will put a number on this, we're going to be able to come up with better offering and assess the value of AI in the workflow much better. That's a long answer.
I see context engineering will be a new skill. I think it's going to become very much about what we include with the instructions that we give to the engines. And I think that current, in the same way as, prompt engineering actually became not so much about individual prompts, but being able to stack and layer prompts, the kind of thing. I think ultimately context engineering is going to be a strong indicator of the sophistication of an enterprise.
Yeah, everything revolved around translation in the past. I think the essential skill is going to become designing the conditions under which good language emerges. Designing the workflow, judging the outputs, data curation, signal figuring. That's signal filtering. That's my prediction. The last one in this round, does localization now become invisible, guys?
Won't be invisible, it just won't be called localization.
I think it'll become infrastructure or utility. It will still be around.
Invisible to whom? Because from a client perspective, localization has always been invisible. It's part of the content creation. So who are we asking? It's going to be part of the full life cycle of the content creation.
Yeah, I think localization doesn't disappear. It disappears into everything. It becomes less visible as a process, not less important as a function, maybe. The workflows fade into the background, but the impact on global contents only increases, I think. Maybe one last one, I lied. I have one more that I really want to ask you guys, and then we'll get to your recommendations. What legacy belief must the industry let go of? Vincent?
The way we judge quality. I think that's the most significant thing we're going to have to change going forward. User sentiment and end user satisfaction is going to become more important than grammar and spelling.
Just one belief? Well, all of the above, everything that Vince mentioned, plus that English is the source, the way we look at org structures, how you build your team and localization or global content, and the way you respond to RFPs.
I love this answer because this is the next episode, right, Stefan? There's so much to unpack there. That's actually a really good one. I like it. We should call the next one, what beliefs do we need to let go of? That's a full episode. To me, I think the sort of concept that translation is the core of what we offer. It's going to become a utility or maybe even go invincible or invisible. So what we offer is really the framework, the infrastructure, the know-how around translation. It's not translation anymore as the core offering.
All right, we're going to move into the final section, and then I'll let you guys go back to work. Here's the recommendations round. Our esteemed panel is going to give us some recommendations. I have a recommendation ready as well. Who wants to go first and button this one up?
I'll go first. So, in memory of South by Southwest and the musical strand there, I'm going to recommend a music artist. My favorite Irish artist at the moment is CMAT, CMAT. She's just released her third album, and it's a cross between country music and glorious pop music with excellent lyrics. So I'd suggest giving that a listen. She's also just announced the dates of her world tour, and if she's playing near you, I would totally recommend her shows. They're great fun.
Vincent mentioned this one to me a couple of weeks ago, and she plays in Brooklyn in April. Oh, no, actually in May. And I went and booked tickets, but then I realized that we're actually doing a live recording of the Signal Room on the same day. So now I have to pick SteamNet or the Signal Room. So I'll keep you guys posted.
We'll excuse you, John. Let's go to the gig.
So if I go next, so my recommendation is also not specific to localization, but maybe not even to our industry in general, but to AI. I think kind of hinted at it before, but I think the biggest skill or maybe attribute that we will need in the future is creativity. So think of model collapse in the space of AI. Basically, that's what happens when AI models don't get enough human input and they get trained on AI generated content or kind of keep reusing the same human generated content, and it just stops working. There are more hallucinations and so on. So the value that we can bring in the future is still through creativity and human input and guidance to the models. So I've been reading this book by Rick Rubin. I don't know if you know him, but Rick Rubin is a music producer. He worked with a bunch of hip-hop acts, but also with the likes of The Strokes or Johnny Cash. There's some really good records released by Johnny Cash called American Recordings, some amazing cover versions that you should check out. But the actual recommendation is a book called The Creative Act, A Way of Being by Rick Rubin. So he talks about how to unlocking creativity and sort of that it's a state of mind and so on, and being aware of that. It's a really interesting read. So that would be my recommendation to get ready for the AI future that we're going to.
That's a tough act to follow. Mine is a lot simpler. Just don't compete with AI. Don't compete. Learn it, direct it, and evolve that mindset from words and segments to overall systems.
Here's my recommendation. We're in the creator economy. Look at where creation has gotten me. I'm sitting in the room with you, brilliant people, talking every 2 weeks about the things that endear us and passion us. Start creating, start putting yourself out there and sharing your thought leadership. You have a lot of value and a lot of things to contribute. And I'm looking forward to building my team members here on the Signal Room team into seasoned social media influencers in the next couple of years. We're gonna make you come out of your shell and contribute more on LinkedIn and the likes.
I'm not social enough for social media.
We're gonna push you out of your comfort zone. We're gonna grow together in so many ways. Thank you so very much, everybody, for making so much time. We've gone an hour. I can't believe it, but it was really, really good. I really enjoyed it. And until we talk again next time, this is the Signal Room signing off.
See you later.
Thank you, everyone.